Welcome back to the final episode of Spooky Season. Each week for the month of October, I've been making a video on a different horror game to celebrate the spooky season. Week 1 was the Outlast Trials, Week 2 was Still Wakes the Deep, Week 3 was House of Ashes, and today we're finishing things off with Alone in the Dark. Alone in the Dark didn't do particularly well, with developer Pieces Interactive shutting down due to the game not reaching expectations. I really didn't expect much when I played this game, but I was actually pleasantly surprised. Alone in the Dark has a hell of a lot of issues, but I have to say, I had a ton of fun with this game, so let's start with the story. Alone in the Dark takes place at a mansion in Louisiana. Emily Hartwood, played by Jodie Comer, enlists the help of Detective Carnby, played by David Harbour of Stranger Things fame, to investigate the disappearance of her uncle Jeremy. I want to note that both of them do a superb job in this game, great performances from them and also from the majority of the cast. But these two characters of course dominate screen time, but the other characters when they do appear really fit the tone of the game quite well. The narrative of Alone in the Dark is designed to explore the thin line between reality and madness, and it does so by gradually unravelling the mental states of its characters. Initially, the game presents Edward Carnby as a grounded and pragmatic detective, driven by a strong sense of purpose. He's portrayed as someone with his feet firmly on the ground, a man of logic trying to solve a case that, on the surface, seems strange but manageable. This initial grounding serves as a crucial baseline for the psychological journey that follows. As the story progresses, Deserto Manor reveals itself as more than just a physical space. It becomes a manifestation of the character's deepest fears and unresolved traumas. The manor's eerie atmosphere, coupled with the supernatural occurrences within, slowly erode Carnby's grip on reality. What begins as a straightforward investigation descends into a labyrinth of hallucinations, shifting realities, and creeping dread. The narrative cleverly uses this descent into madness to explore broader themes of sanity, identity, and the human psyche. The further Carnby delves into the mysteries of Deserto, the more he confronts his own inner demons. The supernatural elements of the story can be interpreted as externalizations of Carnby's deteriorating mental health. This duality, where the horror is both literal and metaphorical, is a core strength of the game's story. The game often blurs the line between what is real and what is imagined. Carnby's journey through the manor becomes a struggle to maintain his sanity, as the horrors he faces threaten to overwhelm his sense of reality. This theme is central to the story, as it questions how much of what we perceive is shaped by our mental state. Carnby's descent into madness is also a journey of self-discovery. As he faces the horrors within Deserto, he is forced to confront parts of himself that he has buried or ignored. The manor acts as a mirror in this respect, reflecting his fears and insecurities back at him, ultimately challenging his sense of identity. Alone in the Dark delves into the Lovecraftian theme of the unknown. The game suggests that there are things in the universe that are beyond human comprehension, and the pursuit of such knowledge can lead to madness. This theme is embodied in the arcane mysteries of Deserto Manor and the dark secrets it holds. Both Carnby and Emily are isolated not just physically, within the confines of the manor, but also psychologically as they grapple with their fears alone. This isolation intensifies the horror aspect, making their desperation more palpable as they seek answers and a way out. The story does eventually go completely off the rails though. It all bubbles up and then just goes insane. When I tell you, this game's final sequence had me with my jaw planted on the ground and laughing like a maniac. Shock value doesn't even begin to cover it. I won't show it here because it's something you need to see for yourself, but just wow. Alone in the Dark crafts a story that effectively combines grounded character development with a gradual terrifying descent into madness. The game uses its themes of sanity, identity, and the unknown to create a psychological horror experience that is as much about the internal struggles of its characters as it is about the external horrors that you face off against. By the end of the game, you see how what began as a grounded, logical investigation has ultimately spiraled into a chaotic, surreal nightmare, leaving you question the nature of the reality itself. Is it a good story? Honestly, I think it could have been. I don't think we spend nearly enough time with the other characters. I think the twists and reveals are too convoluted. and the eventual answers at the end of the game are a little bit overwhelming. It just feels like, in terms of the game's big reveal, they just went too far out there, and it didn't feel satisfying to me.
Hi everyone, this is me. Look how cool I am.
Just wanted to take a 20-second break from the video to say that if you're enjoying the content, then to please check out some of the other videos on the channel if they look interesting to you. You'll be doing yourself a favour if you really think about it. I even have a playlist with some of my best videos, so they're easy viewing. Thanks guys, back to the video. It's no secret that the gameplay of Alone in the Dark is wonky, but while the combat system might feel a bit janky and rough around the edges, I still feel it manages to deliver an engaging and, at times, unexpectedly fun experience. The combat is a mix of melee and gunplay, designed to keep you on your toes. The controls feel unrefined, with aiming and movement not always as responsive as you might hope or expect. This jankiness can lead to moments of frustration, especially when dealing with multiple enemies or you're in tight spaces. However, this same roughness does add an element of unpredictability to each encounter, which can add a little bit of artificial difficulty. The melee combat is horrendous though. When engaging enemies up close, the melee combat requires timing and positioning, or so they want you to think. The clunky controls mean that you need to be really deliberate with your attacks, but sometimes they just fly straight past. It doesn't feel accurate at all, and whilst that is the point of survival horror combat, this really doesn't feel intentional, it feels bad. The firearms in the game offer a more traditional survival horror experience. Ammo is very limited, and the aiming system is intentionally less precise, encouraging you to think carefully about each shot. This imprecision can feel janky, but it also adds to the tension, making every bullet count and every encounter feels significant. There's also a decent amount of enemy variety for a game of this length, roughly 6 or 7 hours per playthrough. The enemies you encounter are grotesque, each with unique attack patterns. The janky combat can make figuring out how to beat these foes a trial and error process, but this also adds to the fun. There's a sense of accomplishment when you finally defeat an enemy after struggling with the controls or adapting your strategy. Whether this is intentional or not is up for debate, but regardless, it still adds to the thrill. Most combat encounters take place in this dream world, where you're transported to random locations that feel entirely separate from the manor. However, sometimes the game flips this on its head. Once you've established in your mind that you're safe inside the manor, you may need to suddenly fight an enemy inside, which was a nice touch. Outside of combat, this game really excels in its exploration and puzzle solving. This manor is filled with secrets, hidden rooms, and environmental puzzles that require a mix of observation and creative thinking. These elements offer a satisfying break from the intensity of combat, allowing you to immerse yourself in the eerie world. Puzzles in non-puzzle games can be difficult to strike the correct balance, but I thought the level of challenge here was perfect. You're encouraged to rummage through your clues to work out the answer, making the detective element more prevalent. If you end up finding a code in a document or something, the game won't just auto-apply that code. You'll need to go into your inventory, analyse the puzzle piece that you've got the answer from, and then memorise it and add it in. It's really manual like that, and I really think it works. Whilst Alone in the Dark doesn't boast the most polished or fluid combat system, the jankiness actually adds to the overall experience. The awkwardness of the controls and the unpredictability of encounters heightens the tension, which makes the battles more intense and memorable. In the context of a survival horror game where vulnerability and fear are supposed to be central pillars, this rough around the edges approach to combat is surprisingly fun. Again, however much of this is intentional is really up for debate, but regardless, it's still there. The atmosphere of any horror game plays a crucial role in shaping the overall experience. Despite being a horror game, Alone in the Dark rarely manages to evoke genuine fear. This is an interesting aspect to evaluate because whilst the game is steeped in horror aesthetic and themes, the actual impact on your emotions never reaches the height of terror. The game is set in this eerie and decaying manor, which is, a richly detailed environment with dark corners and flickering lights, but while these elements establish a strong horror vibe, they don't necessarily translate into moments that are really frightening. The architecture and layout contributes to the atmosphere, with winding corridors, grand but neglected rooms, and plenty of ominous shadows. The attention to detail within the setting is quite impressive, but it often feels like a well-crafted stage rather than a genuinely oppressive place. This might be due to a familiarity with the environment, which aligns closely with the haunted house trope, making it feel somewhat predictable. The sound design is another component of this game's atmosphere, with ambient noises, creaking floors, and the howling wind all contributing to a sense of unease. The soundtrack also complements the setting with eerie music that swells at appropriate moments. However, while these sounds set the mood, they rarely catch you off guard or create a sense of impending doom. The game utilises its sound cues effectively to build suspense, but it often lacks the sharp stinger or unsettling silence that would typically precede a scare in more terrifying games. The result is an atmosphere that feels spooky and unsettling, but never actually scary. It feels as though they made a checklist for things that horror games have and just ticked them all without taking the time to refine them to the point where they actually work. Earlier this month for Spooky Season, I excused Still Wakes the Deep for not being overly scary, as the game wasn't necessarily trying to be this quintessential survival horror expedition. It was trying to tell a brilliant story with an eerie atmosphere, and it did exactly that. Alone in the Dark can't be excused for this reason though, as it was clear that this game was trying to be scary, but failed to do so. More so than most genres, pacing is crucial in horror games, and in Alone in the Dark, the tension builds steadily but often plateaus before reaching the level of true fear. The game's exploration and puzzle solving create a slower, methodical pace, which can be immersive, but also diffuses any build-up of anxiety. The absence of frequent jump scares, combined with the somewhat expected nature of most of the enemies you face, result in an atmosphere that is more eerie than terrifying. You're often aware that something might happen, but the game doesn't always deliver on that suspense in a way that would actually jolt you. The mood of Alone in the Dark is undeniably dark and gothic, with a constant undercurrent of unease. However, it often feels like the game is more focused on creating a creepy, moody environment than delivering outright horror. Now, this isn't necessarily a flaw, as it aligns with the game's thematic focus on psychological horror and mystery, but it does mean that if you're looking for a game that will consistently scare you, Alone in the Dark will not meet those expectations. It still creates an admirable noir aesthetic and mood really well though. Ultimately, Alone in the Dark was a failure. The studio got shut down, the game received extremely meddling reviews, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. I enjoy playing video games, what a shock, and the core reason for that is because I want to argue with people online. But other than that, it's because I think they're fun, and Alone in the Dark is fun. It's not amazing, hell I wouldn't argue with you if you thought it was bad, but I think it's fun. I liken it somewhat to the RoboCop game of last year. RoboCop Rogue City wasn't going to win any awards, but I'll be damned if that game wasn't fun as hell. My feelings on Alone in the Dark somewhat mirror those I had with RoboCop. It gives me some sort of nostalgic satisfaction, of a time where video games were treated as something we did for fun, as a hobby. Yes, Alone in the Dark failed, and that's a massive shame, but there is still value in this game, and ultimately, I think it deserved better. Thank you for making it to the end of not only this video, but also Spooky Season. If you watched the other videos, thank you so much, I hope you enjoyed them. As of next week, we will be making videos on normal games, but don't worry, you won't have to wait until next October for another horror video. I just thought, with it being October, I'll just make 4. But regardless of any of that, we are done here now. If you want to see more videos from me, you may as well subscribe. I upload every single week. And if you like this video, then like it, because that just makes logical sense. But for now, that is all. Have a nice day, and goodbye.
Made the shape of a snake.